We're going to do things, if it's okay with you, Secretary, we're going to do the bill hearing first. I got at least one proponent or conferee that needs to go to another committee. Start off with, do we have any requests for bill introductions? You do? Okay. Secretary Howard has a request for bill introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We actually have two requests for bill introductions today on behalf of DCF. The first is RS 0324. And this relates to allowing minors 16 years of age and older who are in the Secretary's custody or the Corrections Secretary custody or in a tribal Indian tribe's custody to open bank accounts without requiring a cosigner. That's our first request for bill introduction.
Committee, are there any questions on this? Any objection? Okay, what's your next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second bill introduction is RS 0326, and this is a request for a bill introduction that would require the clerk of the district court to give certain notices when QRTP placements take place. Really a technical bill.
Okay, any questions? Objections? Okay, thank you, committee. We will request the introductions. Okay, any other requests? Okay, then we will jump right into our hearing on House Bill 2194, enacting the Representative Gail Finney Memorial Foster Care Bill of Rights. And I'll ask the Revisor Jesse to give us an overview of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Before you is House Bill 2194, which proposes the Representative Gail Finney Memorial Foster Care Bill of Rights. And then that Bill of Rights be placed in the revised Kansas Code for the care of children. So this Bill of Rights is to be consistent with the policy of the state as expressed in such code. And the new section before you in the bill lists items that a foster youth and foster parents shall have the right to, or already in statute have a right to. So first is subsection B, and it begins to ensure proper care and protection of a child in need of care in the child welfare system, unless otherwise ordered by a court. Such child shall have the right to, and then begins the list. And that list contains a few items, including living in a safe, comfortable place, visits with family, minimal placements and or changes to maintain belongings, access to supplies and services, and to attend school. To receive a diploma if they meet those qualifications, notifications of hearings in which they are the subject of, attend those hearings, address the court in some of those hearings, have an appointed guardian ad litem, and if that doesn't work out, request from the court to appoint an attorney, the right to privacy, the right to contact with and access to their case manager, and including access to services and skills when transitioning out of care. Subsection C begins, in order to ensure active participation of foster parents as an integral and indispensable and vital role in the state's efforts to care for children in the custody of the Secretary. Section C then lists rights that either exist or created here for foster parents. And that list includes to be treated with respect, to not be discriminated against, to continue with family values and beliefs with the consideration to the child's needs, to make decisions concerning the child that's consistent with the code, to receive trainings, to receive timely financial reimbursements, receive information. This list is a little longer, so bear with me. Receive information regarding a child that may jeopardize the health and safety of the family, to discuss information related to the child prior to the placement and later as information becomes available, to refuse or to request the removal of a child, to participate in the child's case planning, to communicate when appropriate with the child's professional team, which can range from anyone from the case manager to other people that are providing services to the child, be notified of court hearings, Additionally, be considered a placement if that child has previously resided with that family and they are finding themselves again in the custody of the secretary. To remain in contact with the child after placement of such child with those foster parents. Be notified in advance of court hearings or review where case plans or the permanency of the child is at issue. Ask questions of DCF related to the licensure of foster parents as a foster care facility. Have the rights described in this section be given full consideration when DCF develops and approves policies regarding placement and permanency. Submit reports regarding the child, and request a court hearing regarding a change of placement existing in statutes related to the child's placement if that child has been placed with those foster parents for more than 6 months or longer. So that is House Bill number 2194. And as previously as the agenda stated, House Bill 2112 had been introduced, and that had been sponsored by the Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight. I wanted to spend a few minutes going over differences in this bill that is not found in 2112. So House Bill 2194, in the naming, it's Representative Gail Finney Memorial Foster Care Bill of Rights in 2194. In subsection B1, Cap D, when it talks about investigations regarding where to live, the consideration of kinship care placement shall also be considered. The lead-in for the foster care parents part found in subsection C, this part where it says consistent with the state policy, that is newly added and meant to match subsection B. And then lastly, at the end of subsection C, you find 21 and 22, which are two completely new items that have been added, which is submitting the report and requesting a court hearing regarding the change of placement. So if you have any questions regarding the differences, those are going to be the differences you can find. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm available for questions.
Okay, committee, do we have questions for Jesse? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jesse, I remember I remember when Representative Finney, I think was here last year, talking, presenting her bill, and at the time, like some of the question had come up that some of these rights are already embedded in current policy and some of them aren't. Is it outlined anywhere which of these are like new rights, as it would be, versus things that are already in statute?
Jesse.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Wagner, yes. So items that have references stating in KSA 3822, it references a specific statute that you can find either that process in or that right is in. And then as well as I'd like to point out, each lead-in for B and C say consistent with the policy. So even if that right exists and it may not be explicitly stated in that reference, it's to be read in consistency with the current law.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to, I believe it's subsection C at the very end of the bill, one of the items that you noted as newly introduced, item number 22, can you explain that? You did once, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the definition.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Carr, that paragraph 22 where you request a hearing regarding the change of placement. So first, that process is already in statute. And so if a child has been with a family, with a foster family in their custody or in their placement for more than 6 months, then those foster parents have a right to request a hearing and participate in a hearing when another placement is suggested. So if the DCF comes in and petitions for a change in placement, then that allows them to be involved in that process and request a hearing on that change in placement.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions? Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jesse, and I'm looking at 2194, but the foster parent section, and then number 15, be notified in advance of any court hearing or review where the case plan or permanency of the child is an issue. So would that include the best interest staffing?
Yes, Jesse.
Madam Chair, Representative Humphreys, are you referencing subsection C15 in the bill, or are you just talking about C15? Okay, so C15, in the bill brief in front of you, the numbers do not necessarily correlate to the bill. So C15 in the bill is to communicate with members of the professional team.
I think it's 16. I think it's 6. Well, so I'm looking at 2112. I have the
Okay.
wording for that one. So I guess it is 16 in that one, not 15.
Sure, yes.
So would 16 include the best interest staffing? So foster parents are included in the best interest staffing.
So if DCF or anyone considers the best interest staffing to be a part of where the case plan or the permanency of the child is the issue, that would be included in that section.
Okay. So I guess we can ask DCF that question. Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, thanks, Jesse. Okay, we'll open up the proponent section, and first I'll call on Rachel Marsh with Children's Alliance. Hi, Rachel.
Vice Chair Johnson and Ranking Member Owsley and members of the committee. My name is Rachel Marsh. I'm the CEO of the Children's Alliance of Kansas, and thank you for the opportunity to present proponent testimony in support of HB 2194. First, I just want to thank you for the idea to name and memorialize this this bill after Representative Gail Finney. I'm going to go a little bit off of script of the bill itself and just talk a little bit about Representative Finney and how I got to know her. And it was actually around this bill. She called me into her office and she sat me down and we talked a little bit, and she said, "I'd like to have you take a look at this bill. I'd really just like to hear what you think about it. Can you take some time? Can you go look at it and bring it back and tell me if you could be in support of it?" And so I did, because I do very carefully review bills, and I took some time and I came back and I said, "I think your bill looks great. I'd be happy to work with you on this." And when I thought about this bill being named after Representative Finney, I just thought that story is how she probably dealt with the foster children that she had in her care. Can we talk about this? Can you help me understand what your perspective would be? Can we work together? And I just thought it's so important that we name this bill after Representative Finney. So thanks for letting me tell that story. On the bill itself, I want to offer our support for, I think Jesse did a great job of articulating the specifics in the bill that are included, and I don't need to go over those. What I want to share is the importance that we have a separate statement of rights for foster children that we can hand to them when they can read, so that they know this is my rights. I can ask questions about this. And also so that foster parents can have that same thing. And I will be honest with you, when I first heard of a foster parent and child bill of rights years ago, I thought, well, the rights, I know the rights, so this shouldn't necessarily need to be legislation, but I want to answer that question for you. Just because I, a child welfare attorney, know the rights doesn't mean our foster children know their rights. It doesn't mean that foster parents know their rights. And so that's why I'm in support of the bill, that it does a comprehensive job of including those extra 2 provisions that are newly added, to make sure that when you give your statement of rights, it actually includes all the rights that are relevant to you. So rather than going through them in depth, I'll end my testimony and be happy to stand for questions on any of the technical aspects of the bill if you have them.
Okay, committee, Rachel is going to have to go to another committee to testify, so we'll take any questions for her at this time. Well, that was easy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Carlin, I have you as written only. Are you, okay, you don't want to make any comments? You're welcome to.
Thank you very much, Representative Concanon and committee. I have officed with Gail Finney for many, many years, and I know just how hard she worked on these things and what a careful representative she was, and everything she did was always by the book, and I think you will find that everything here is going to be helpful and should not be a concern of yours about her reasoning or why, and I just hope you'll give it your full consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, also on the list is Crystal Hedrick from Foster Adopt Connect, and she is here in person. I think it's listed as written only, but welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. As Representative Concanon said, my name is Crystal Hedrick, and I'm the Vice President at Foster Adopt Connect here in Kansas. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify here in support of HB 2194. As a former foster parent and adoptive parent, this is something that's near and dear to our heart and something that our agency, Foster Adopt Connect, has been behind for several years. So thank you again for this opportunity. This bill comes at an excellent time where our Kansas child welfare leaders are partnering with Annie E. Casey Foundation and young leaders with lived experience on the proposed sole family permanency option that'll give additional resources to kids in care that are aging into or transitioning out into adulthood. This is really an opportunity to raise up youth voices in their own journey towards safety and well-being. Additionally, this is a great time to support our caregivers to kids in care. Foster parenting really goes beyond providing food and shelter to kids. Caring for a child 24/7 creates an environment where we know a child and their current situation better than most. I can take myself back about 10 years. I was a young supervisor and supporting a case manager on a really, really difficult and challenging case where we were supporting some kids who had experienced significant abuse and neglect. And they were scheduled to be doing their forensic exams with the Children's Advocacy Center. And we were helping support a young girl. She was about 8 or 9, and several professionals there, forensic interviewers, child therapists, her case manager, myself, and we were all really trying to create a safe environment where she felt safe to go into this room and share some of her experiences and stories. And we had been going at it for 20 to 30 minutes, and she was not having it. She was really shut down. She was really just struggling to engage with any of us, and clearly was really, really scared and terrified. And the foster mom of all but 3 or 4 days said, "Do you mind if I take a stab at it?" And we're like, yeah, we're all striking out here. And she squatted down with her and said, I remember specifically her saying, taking off her wedding ring. And she put it in her little hand and she closed it. And she said, "Remember when you asked me why I wear my wedding ring and I never take it off? And I told you what it meant to me and how important it was to me." She said, "You know I'll never leave this wedding ring, right?" And the little girl, she kind of nodded and she said, "You're going to hold this and you take this back in that room with you and you be brave and you tell your story. And I'll be sitting here waiting for you and I'll be waiting for my wedding ring." And that kid hopped up and she grabbed the snacks that we were all trying to coax her with, and she went back into that room, and she very bravely shared her story. And foster mom sat there and waited for her to come back out. And I thought to myself, right in that moment, that's something that none of the professionals can ever do for her. That foster mom, in a matter of days, had created a relationship and a feeling of safety and connectedness that she could not have from the professionals that were working to support her. And to me, that's really what this bill represents, is an opportunity to raise up the voices of people who are caring for young people and giving them an opportunity to represent and advocate the needs of the youth in their home. This really isn't about new privileges to foster parents, but giving them a voice to advocate for the children that they're caring for. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you. Do we have questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, all the rest of the testimony that I have on my agenda is shown as written only. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify in person? Okay, so you've got Taylor Williams, testimony from St. Francis Ministry, Representative Stephanie Clayton, Rachel Roosevelt from TFI, Secretary Howard from DCF, Mike Fonkert with Kansas Appleseed, Matt Stevens, also with St. Francis Ministries, Carrie Leonard from the Office of the Child Advocate, and Kendall Seal, the Center for Rights of Abused Children. I don't show any neutral conferees, and I show no opponent conferees. Oh, Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And not a conferee, but if it'd be appropriate at this time, I have Gail Finney's Celebration of Life handout from her funeral I'd pass around to the committee, if that'd be
It'd be very appropriate, and that's great. Thank you for bringing that.
trying to give you all an idea who Gail Finney was and what work she did, not only in the State House, but back in her community. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 2194. And so up next, we will hear from Secretary Howard, who has been kind enough to come back after we had our hearing ran long the other day. And we didn't have any opportunity for questions at the end. And I guess I'll give you the floor first if you have any new comments you'd like to make, introductory comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to come back to respond to any questions. I know we went through the overview of the child welfare system pretty quickly last time, so I'm always happy to dig in a little bit deeper on pieces. You know, one area I probably didn't say very much about that I just wanted to remind the committee again is that, you know, in this state where we have kind of a public-private partnership for delivery of services, we will be re-entering into a rebid process with those foster care case management providers with planned release of that RFP by summertime, awards by December of 2023, and those new grants would go into effect July 1 of 2024. I was talking with one of the child welfare providers out in the audience, and I was trying to think about since child welfare public-private partnership started in 1997, this is probably the sixth time that we would be going through a bid process, fifth or sixth time. So I did want to mention that.
So that was what my question was going to be about, was that bid process. Yeah, I know, you're reading my mind. So you covered the timeline. My question is, when they bid that, are we required, is there a scoring method on their application, or are we required to take the lowest bid?
No, in Kansas procurement law, there's not a requirement to take the lowest bid. And in fact, the review of the programmatic side of the bids occurs separately and before financial bids are even reviewed or looked at. So, I mean, so both are looked at. In regard to the context of scoring, I mean, the RFP will be structured in such a way that there will be a whole series of items and then a way to sort of rank each of the entities on each of those items. So no, there's no requirement to take the lowest financial bid, and obviously both the programmatic and financial, you know, fit together in those considerations.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. I've got some other questions, but I think I'll let the committee ask their questions. Are you having trouble remembering your questions? You want to go? Sure. Representative Humphreys.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So I have some questions about not the bidding, not the RFP and the bidding process for the grantees, but for the, you know, I don't know what we're calling, I've forgotten what you call it, the infrastructure, the computer, you know, the...
Sure, CWIS,
what is,
the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, yep, thanks. So, you know, I feel like we've been hearing about that for a really long time. like probably even before you were the secretary, the previous secretary, we were hearing about this. And so I just would like some sort of understanding on why it's taken so long. I maybe have a few follow-up questions too, if that's okay. So, but maybe a little bit better understanding of, you know,
Sure.
what's taking so long.
Yeah, I believe you're probably right, Representative Humphreys, and thank you, Madam Chair. There probably was dialogue and perhaps even budgetary requests for a comprehensive child welfare information system before I was secretary, and perhaps even when I was in different roles in the past. You know, the reliance on legacy systems and a variety of different systems, I mean, has been going on for a long time. I mean, it's been a long time since the state procured anything on the child welfare system side. So starting, you know, 3 budget years ago, I think the first budget that Governor Kelly proposed included some funding for planning for the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System. And these are, it's not just that these are complicated systems, but much like on the Medicaid side, our federal partners have lots of standards and requirements that have to be met to be certified as a CWIS system. And so in addition to the normal state processes you have to go through, there's several levels of federal approval processes. And so this legislature has funded a couple years of planning dollars for us. We've gone through all of those kind of hoops with our federal partners, a whole series of things we had to submit over time. There's kind of a I'm going to get some of the things wrong because they all have acronyms. There's the PAPD and the PIAPD, but you go through a whole series of things in terms of advanced planning documents with the federal partners to get approval before you're ready to put out an actual bid for implementation. So we've gone through all of those processes now, as well as through the state's CEDO and KETO process. So we now have authorization to submit implementation RFPs. And those are with procurement now, so those should be going out on the public site really within a couple of weeks, I would imagine, at this stage. And so it's a long process. I wish it had gone sooner. It's a lot of back and forth with our federal partners, a lot of assessment and analysis, wanting to understand, you know, perhaps states who were a little bit ahead of us, looking at what they did, you know, having the chance to hear some things before you're in a procurement process from what systems are out there. So again, kind of a long process and probably too long of an answer for your question, Representative.
Okay, I have a little bit of a follow-up. So do I understand you right to say, okay, in a few weeks, you're going to have an RFP to attract bidders for the eventual RFP? I mean, what you're saying, I mean, it seems like a 2-step process instead of, you know, the RFP you talked about in a couple of weeks, that's not to actually get a new CCWIS system. That's to design the RFP to get the new system. Is that what I understand you saying?
Okay, there will be, let me try to be as clear as I can on this. There will be 3 bids that go out, and a couple of those are things that our federal partners require us to have when you put out an information systems RFP. So the first one is about design, development, and implementation. So this is an RFP around the design, development, and implementation of the new system. So it is, we will be seeking bidders to lead that effort. And again, that is around design, development, and implementation. That could mean I assume we will get a variety of proposals. I assume we will get proposals from people who bring off-the-shelf solutions to us that perhaps might need some modification or may not. And I imagine we'll get proposals from entities that would be more from a design stage. We won't know really till we get those vendors in. in. There will be 2 other RFPs that are required kind of parallel with that. You have to have a quality assurance piece, so there will also be a quality analysis RFP. And basically, those will be bids for an entity who can provide quality assurance services of the deliverables from the implementation vendor. For example, validating the functionalities of the system compared to the system requirements that we put in the RFP, things like that. And then third, there's what's called an IVV vendor, and that's a vendor that will look at overall project performance. Are we adhering to the project schedule? Are we making the kind of progress that we are supposed to make on that through their conversations with project team members, leaders, and vendors? So there will be an implementation RFP representative, and then there will be these 2 other pieces. I think the 2 others are what's a bit confusing to people right now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So when you say implementation, you're talking about a new IT system.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. A new IT system.
Okay.
That's right.
So in a couple weeks, you're going to put out RFPs for a new IT system.
Yes, for a comprehensive child welfare information system for an entity that wants to be involved in design, development, and integration of a new system.
Okay, and then there's the quality control piece, and then did you say IVV?
Yeah, it's independent verification and validation, and again, that's kind of a requirement on kind of large kinds of IT projects. So again, which those are good things, because I think they keep us on track for what is going to be a very extensive process, Representative.
And that's going to be 3 separate RFPs.
That's correct.
So according to your timetable, when might we actually have something up and running that's going to help the foster kids in Kansas?
I think that's hard for me to say right now, Representative Humphreys. One of the things, when the RFP comes out, part of how it's designed will be to allow vendors to talk about how they might propose things maybe in modules or functionally, so that as opposed to like a big bang in 5 years, maybe pieces that could come on board along the way. So, but until we see those bids and until we see what those proposals are and what those timeframes are, I can't give you a clear answer, but we have designed this so that people can propose maybe certain pieces or certain modules coming live before. It's not like just
so
a big bang at the end.
Big bang, 5 years. So you're saying maybe it's going to be 5 years before we get a new system in place?
No, what I'm saying, Representative, before every component of that new system is in place. But vendors will have the ability to propose different parts of the new system.
And aren't there, right now, some elements that we could just put in place right now?
Well, there are elements that would be easier to put in place than other elements, Representative Humphreys. One of the pieces that we're probably most excited about, but also will take a lot of work, is the ability to have a system that both we and our case management providers and others are really all that information being in those same systems. But we're very interested in, where can we make progress immediately, knowing that the full, robust functionality that a CWIS system needs federally, and there's a lot of pieces and components to that, will take several years to fully implement.
And so if I understand correctly, in the social services budget request, it was like $100 million for the new IT system. And I think we've already appropriated $12 million. So is that going to do it, or is that for making sure all these systems are in place so that we can actually decide on the RFPs? And what's the financial cost?
Great, yeah, thank you for that question. And of course, we won't know for sure until we have bids in. What we had proposed in our budget was $25 million a year over a 4-year period. So kind of to get to that $100 million, which is kind of a big bucket estimate, based on experience in other states. I mean, based on the prior planning dollars that you've given to us, we still have 12 or $13 million in our budget that will fund us through this fiscal year. So what we intend to do is once we have a sense from the bids as they come in, we would then look to request a governor's budget amendment or put something in our revised budget next year that reflects those actual costs.
And when would you expect to have those bids in?
I don't know. I don't have the dates in front of me, Representative Humphrey, so I don't want to misspeak in terms of what's on that RFP, but I can get that back to the committee.
Hey, I think that would be great, and I'll finish with this. But I think the concern is, I've been on children and seniors is what it used to be called for several years ago, and then on appropriations, and we have been talking about this for a really long time. And then to hear you say probably 5 years before everything's put in place, that's 5 years that, caseworkers are, overloaded because they don't have a really streamlined system that they can use. And every system's not talking to each other and things are antiquated. And it's just concerning and disappointing that, we can't get, and I understand it's complicated. That I'm not saying it's not complicated. It's just that by the time 5 years from now, it's like that's 10 years that we've been trying to update our IT system at Department of Children and Families. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any way to speed things up or use things off the shelf that we can find now, I think we would be very much in favor of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. It's certainly our goal to move as quickly as possible as we start this RFP process and see what people bring to us. So thank you.
And if you do have some sort of timetable, then that would be great if we.
That sounds great. We'll get that back to you. I just don't have it in front of me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of Representative Humphrey's concerns. So when you receive the RFPs, do you have a timetable with respect to the evaluation process before you make a selection? Can you provide us with that information when you provide the other information as well?
Yes, what we'll give you is kind of the timetable that will be included with the RFP. So that will include how much time people will have to submit their bids and what our projections are in terms of that negotiation time period and the projected award date.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions, if I could. So how many applicants do you have for these contracts that are coming up? Are they multiple applicants? Are they the same people? Are they new from out of state or?
Yeah, Representative Howerton, I think you're now talking about, I think the case management providers, right, are key. Well, of course, those RFPs aren't issued yet. I mean, they will be issued, probably close to summertime.
Normally.
Yeah, so, we normally have between probably 6 to 8 in recent procurement processes. Over the course of kind of the history of the public-private partnership in Kansas since 1997, there have been a handful of circumstances where we've had bids from an out-of-state entity, but I could count those on one hand, probably less than one hand. I'm recalling maybe 2 to 3 bids from out-of-state entities over that time. And primarily, I mean, what we will likely see will be entities who currently play some role within the Kansas child welfare system as a case management provider, as a child placement agency, or a similar role. I mean, that's what history would tell me, Representative. I, of course, can't rule out that we would have entities coming in from other states because obviously some other states in more recent years have modeled the Kansas system a bit more, and so we do have more entities around the country who are involved in this kind of work than there were a few years ago.
So how many of the case management providers, you'll have to forgive me, I'm new to this committee, so I'm learning the terminology, are child placement agencies and do foster care? Do both, I guess, or multiple services?
Sure. Yeah, I think typically we end up with most entities who are selected, or entities who are selected for the case management providers. In most cases, they also are existing child placing agencies in the state. One example I might use, so for example, if you think about some of our current providers, so KBC, TFI, St. Francis Ministries, long-standing child placing agencies in the state. If we think about one of our newest providers, Cornerstones of Care, they, for example, did more work on the Missouri side. They were a child placing agency in Missouri, but really didn't have a large child placing agency presence in Kansas. So again, in most cases, both, and I would expect that's what we would see. But again, I don't want to presuppose that totally. The case management providers are bid grants or contracts for those entities who will play those case management roles for those children after they come into custody. Child placing agencies, that's not through a bid process. Child placing agencies, the agencies that work with our foster families, recruit, sponsor, support the foster families. We have agreements with those child placing agencies in order to be able to pay those costs for the foster care, the actual placements. And maybe just to put a little bit of history on this, in some of the prior versions of our case management provider agreements, we expected them to pay all of the placement costs, and they used to do negotiations with the actual child placing agencies, the agencies that sponsored foster parents. We changed that in the current grants that we're under right now, and standardized sort of the rates paid to the different levels of foster parents. So again, the bid process, as you think about that, would be the case management providers. Yeah, I hope that's clear. And there's no dumb question in this. This is a complicated area, as those know who've worked on this for a long time.
Other questions? Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. So kind of along those lines, can you just let the committee know how that process works as far as when you issue the RFP and then you get your answers back, and then what happens after that, and time frame, and who looks at it, and just all those, how does that work?
Sure. And if I might, Representative Humphreys, I would let me even start before we issue the RFP. Right now, within DCF on our child welfare team, we've begun a series of input sessions with a variety of entities across the state, and just to get input. What's working, what would you like to see as you think about these case management provider agreements. That includes, for example, with foster parents. We're having sessions with youth. Obviously, the CPAs, the CMPs, mental health professionals. So we're doing sort of a series of listening sessions to get input, and then obviously also looking at recommendations that have come out of committees over the years, recommendations that have come from post-audit, just things we've learned over these 4 years. So that's at the front end. After people bid, there will be a formalized review team that will include representatives from kind of the central office and the regions at DCF. and probably also kind of representatives from KDAD's kind of on the behavioral health side of the equation. I'd like them at them at the table as well. So they'll go through kind of that formal review process. After that piece is done, the finance team will also look at the bids. There'll be some sort of initial. There'll be opportunities like for questions and answers. There may be things that need to be clarified within the proposals. So there would be opportunities to either send out those questions or to have those meetings in person with those entities. And then ultimately, after several weeks of review, then recommendations would be made to me as to the successful bidders, and so kind of a very extensive review process. I won't see those until a lot of review has already gone on by people who are designated to be part of those review teams.
And so if I understood you correctly, so you're going to get input from a lot of different people, I mean, providers and even, others. But then once the RFPs come in and you review them, that's just going to be DCF and maybe some KDADs. I mean, it's just agency people would be looking at the
It is
RFPs.
at that point. That's right. That's right.
And we've had, I'm not intimately familiar with the situation, but I know in the Department of Labor there was a situation where there's off the shelf, providers that can help things. But RFPs tend to be written at times specifically for certain groups. And so it just seems like there should be some accountability as far as how the RFPs are written and who reviews them. And I don't know what the plan is there, but we've seen, we've seen things in the past that would make us think maybe a little bit of accountability is a good thing.
Oh, I agree with you, Representative Humphries, on that very much. And one of the things that I always think is really valuable in RFPs is when we can keep things more open-ended so they don't seem to sort of dictate a particular provider or vendor, where we can say, what steps would you take to ensure that youth aren't spending that in offices, as opposed to here's a model, whatever the piece is. We will probably be including a lot of pieces that are about. We don't want people just to kind of just give cookie cutter answers and just mark off the 47 things we say you have to have in place. We want to know what innovation and expertise they're actually bringing to the table to meet the outcomes that we call out within the RFP. So, thank you.
Representative Howerton.
Sorry, just to follow up. Thank you, Madam Chair. So is there any kind of committee that reviews this, or it just steps it up to you?
I mean, it's an internal review committee that it goes through that process.
Who's on that committee?
That would be representatives of the DCF Child Welfare Team, some folks from our regional offices, and as I said, also probably a KDAD's representative.
Are there any legislators?
No.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me apologize because I'm new to this committee, as some of the other members are, and I'm just need some clarification on the definition. So when we speak of the child placement agency, is that that agency, do they, in addition to housing the children, do they place them in foster care with foster parents, or exactly, could you explain that piece of it for me?
Sure. The child placing agencies are agencies in Kansas that sponsor, recruit, and support foster families. Just to kind of keep that simple. Under our design in Kansas, it is our case management providers, those lead agencies, that have the responsibility to make decisions about where a child is placed. And so they would work with those child placing agencies to place that child in the appropriate foster home or with a relative or whatever that placement ends up looking like. So it's a little bit, before privatization, the name Child Placing Agency is a little bit, I think it can be a little bit confusing these days, just based on the role that our case management providers have, honestly, Representative Carr. But again, their role of the child placing agencies is to recruit, support our foster families.
Okay, thank you.
When I first started working with this stuff, it really helped for me to think of it in silos. I mean, they all end up working together, but, up front, there's family first money and family preservation, and then there's the placement agencies.
Child placing agencies and case management providers.
And then you have case management providers, and then following that, then there's adoption, and there's a whole other bunch of other stuff in between.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of pieces. You're right, Chairman. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just based on the case plan for the child, is the child going back home? Is the child going towards adoption? Is independent living in the option for that child? There's a lot of pieces based on what pathway that the child is on.
Yeah. Representative Pickert.
Okay, being another new girl on the block here. Yesterday, I spent time on the DCF website, and that has a wealth of information. If you're new to this, I would recommend going and maybe not taking it all in at one time, because there's a lot on there, but there's all kinds of things. If you drill down, you can see outcomes, you can see numbers, you can see money spent, you can see the different programs. There's all kinds of stuff. So it might help make sense of this, because it is so complicated.
Thank you. Representative Wagoner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Secretary Howard, so how often do the contracts for the case management providers, these are the sort of the big regional,
Right.
comes up every 3 years, 5 years? What's the,
Usually 4 to 5 years. We usually write them as like maybe 3 years with up to 2 one-year extensions, or 4 years with up to 1 to 2 year extensions. It's been a little bit different each time, but think in that 4 to 5 year range.
if I may, and they're coming up, when do they come up next?
Yeah, so we will be entering into one of those extension periods for 1 more year. And then, as I said, we would transition to new case management providers at July of 24. So July 23 to 24 would be one of those optional extension years. And that would be the period of time during which we're going through the procurement and transition process. And it's really important to have, a good 6 months after bids are awarded in this system. I don't know if, we would have changes that would result in transitions, but it's really important that that's managed very well because of the impact on youth who may be transitioning, and we don't want to negatively impact their progress towards permanency. So we really need that 6-month period to really have a robust and strong transition.
So I guess my question would be, and again, this is coming at a little bit from a private industry standpoint where, if I had 4 suppliers for a certain part, and I would have, some of them might clearly stand out versus others as far as, just quality of the part and just reliability and such ever. Do you have a rating? You have like 3 or 4 different companies right now that are agencies that handle different regions. Do you have a rankings of them, like your sort of internal, as far as this outfit clearly does a better job than the rest, or, I'm kind of asking just from ignorance, but is that out there, and is that public information?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. I think what we might share with this committee is kind of a kind of a red, green, yellow chart that I think we shared with the Oversight Committee this summer. There's a series of federal outcomes that we have to meet that we also place on our case management providers, and then also some state outcomes on top of that. And so, I mean, there's regular review. We're monitoring them all the time. And so we have that data. We have to provide to the federal agency as Representative Pickert said, there's a lengthy outcomes document on our website, but we recently put together something that just kind of shows for our providers, you know, who's kind of hitting the outcomes, or in some cases, maybe they've been on a corrective action plan, who's kind of making that progress, where is it lagging? And I think the interesting thing you see from that is the different case management providers bring different strains. I mean, you'll see one that's maybe doing very, very well on the issue of, permanency and kind of the permanency in child time, how timely that permanency is. You might see another case management provider where you see, I mean, for example, placement with relatives being higher. So again, as you look at it, you'll see different strains, I mean, as you look across. So, I mean, I wouldn't stand here today and say, gosh, I can just say this one is at the top, this one is at the bottom. They bring different strains, and they do better or worse on different outcomes. So, but we can provide that to the committee. I think it's a pretty easy snapshot to see in terms of how our current providers are doing.
Further questions? Okay, thank you for being here. Oh, did you have a question? Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Representative Humphreys.
So with the permission of the chair, I would love to just take 1 or 2 minutes to, I mean, there's a lot of new people on the committee, so I know it helped me when someone just sort of helped me visualize. Okay, so if that's okay, if I just take a minute to say one thing about what we're talking about. So we're talking about 2 completely different things. So one I asked a question about at the beginning was all about the IT system. That's one thing. Then the other RFPs is about the case management providers. And through the years, we've called those grantees and we've called them other things. There's DCF, and then there's like 4 case management providers, and that's what those RFPs coming up are for, and they're kind of regional for the most part. Then underneath those are like 25 child placing agencies. And they do all kinds of different things. So that just helped me understand when I was new to kind of, in my mind, get a picture of that sort of hierarchy and what it was. So when we have these RFPs with maybe the same case management providers or maybe different ones, you know, those child placing agencies are still going to be in place. And some of the case management providers, and Representative Howerton kind of alluded to this, also are child placing agencies. Some of them do both levels. And so I just felt like, I know I was lost when I first started all of this, so thank you for indulging me in that.
Oh, Representative Howerton.
Sorry, I have a question. So a grantee is a case management provider? That's the same?
That,
Same thing.
yes, well, not all grantees are case management providers, but all case management providers are grantees. Well, there are. So this might be a good time. This might be a good time to tell you that Rachel Marsh is going to do a presentation on Wednesday called Roadmap of Foster Care or to Foster Care. That will just kind of follow a normal foster case that maybe doesn't have all the exceptions, but she's going to try to simplify it to us. But yeah, so we were talking about the different silos. Those people all they all have grants from the state. So case management is just one of those silos. all case management are grantees. All case management providers are grantees. Not all grantees are case managers. Some of them do child placement. Yeah. Okay. I do not feel qualified to have just said what I said, but I did. You know, and wow, good. I'm glad it made sense. While we're talking about Wednesday, yeah, Rachel's going to be here to do a roadmap for us. We're going to have a report presentation from the Child Death Review Board. We've been doing that every year, and so we'll hear from them. We'll get the annual report from the Office of the Child Advocate. And Natalie Nelson from KLRD will give us a report from the Child Welfare Oversight Committee and go over the recommendations that the Oversight Committee made. They meet quarterly. I'm on that. So we meet quarterly, and at the end of the year, they make recommendations. And so that report is out, and so she's going to do an overview of that. Do you have your hand up? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I don't want to belabor this anymore, but so where do the like the group homes fall in the, are they under the placement agency? Because I know that the children are placed out of those group homes into foster care. So at what portion of the tier do those group homes fall?
Secretary Howard, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, you could connect those along with the child placing agencies. So we have family foster care, we have some group residential care, we also have what are called qualified residential treatment programs as a part of Family First, which are also group facilities. But again, I think the important piece is that it's the case management provider who's making the decision about the placement of the child. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that good? Okay. Okay, committee, we've got a little bit of time, so I think we are going to work a bill. And just before we start this, I just want to let you know, for those of you who are back from previous years with when I've chaired the committee, I'm going to work bills a little differently this year than I have in the past. We had a chairs meeting and kind of discussed maybe we wanted more uniformity. So, and you've probably had experiences on committees where chairs do things different ways. So I'm going to introduce that we're going to start discussion of this bill. I will turn to the reviser to give an overview. 2024, by the way. And then we'll work the bill as far as asking for amendments, and then when all of the amendments are in, then we will ask for a motion, which is a little different than what we've done before. We've asked for the motion first. And then we'll have further discussion. And so at this time, we will work House Bill 2024, which is the Safe Haven Baby Bassinet Bill. And I'd ask Jesse to give us a quick overview.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2024 is the bill that amends the Newborn Infant Protection Act, found in KSA 382282. Remember how the current law only allows someone to have civil or criminal immunity if they hand over a child who has not been a victim of abuse or neglect and is younger than 60 days old to a person in a facility such as a medical care facility, a fire station, a police station, etc. So what the bill proposes is that these same facilities may have a device installed in a wall with required alarms, etc. And the bill would allow for a person who places an infant meeting those same qualifications in that device to also be immune from civil and criminal liability.
Other questions for Jesse? Okay. Are there any amendments for House Bill 2024? Representative Johnson.
Yes. I have several amendments, and these come to us out of the Oversight Committee. These were some of the recommendations. Do you have copies for everyone? I thought we were going to do this electronically. Thank you. So as you get those, one of the keys that we talked about in the Oversight Committee is possibly the name. We were a little concerned, Infant Refuge Bassinet. And we felt like, and this was by several of the individuals, is that it is actually a newborn safety device. And as such, we would like to insert that several places into the bill. Instead of calling it an infant refuge bassinet, it would now be called a newborn safety device. We also wanted to make sure that everyone knew this is a voluntary process. In no place is any agency, city, county agency going to be required to utilize one of these newborn safety devices. And so we would like to add the word voluntarily installed on line 21, section A, to make it very clear this is something you may do if you so choose. Another issue that came up during our discussion is that if it is placed there and everyone at that station is called away, which is possible on emergencies of a large nature, is that it would have a dual alarm system, a system that will dispatch first responders when all employees of the facility are unavailable. And this was based on, and this would be located on line 23, section B, after located. On a structural wall, we wanted to insert that. And then again, the dual alarm system is on line 22. From my personal experience, there are some occasions on large call-outs and everyone is gone. The dispatcher has immediate access to call in mutual aid. For example, in my department, we would have another fire department would bring in a pumper unit to our station at any time all of our units were out fighting a multi-alarm call. It does not have to be another fire department. It can be a law enforcement officer. One of the main examples of this was on WIBW's newscast not too long ago, where a policeman was dispatched. So the alarm goes off, everyone at the station was gone. He was there within a couple minutes. That policeman and his wife later adopted that young child. I thought that was just wonderful. And so those are the amendments, that changes on the first page. On page 2, it is simply installing newborn safety device twice and adding the word device on line 14 in place of the word bassinet. On page 3, again, newborn safety device on line 13, section II. And one of the issues that did come up in the Oversight Committee was issues about a second parent, not the one submitting the child, wishing to make claims. And we wish to add, when such person seeking to establish parental rights, the court shall require the person at the person's expense to submit to genetic test to verify that the person is the biological parent of the child. And this would go on line 33 at the end. I want to make it very clear that there was provisions in the original law, we didn't have to add these, that all provide for the rights of a second parent, a father who might not have known, and ways for the courts to make rulings on this child so that another parent could come back and have options to assume parentage. And there are no changes on page 4.
Is there a second? Okay, second by Representative Humphreys. Let's see, you explained it. I guess, first of all, I need a motion to amend.
I would hereby motion that we amend House Bill number 2024 by making the notations contained on the document.
I'll just go, and Representative Humphreys has already seconded that. Is there discussion regarding the amendment? Representative Pickert.
I just have a question. The bassinet that's available out there, does it have the dual alarm system on it? Do you know if it does?
It's my understanding, dual alarm means a system in which multiple people are alerted. Now, in the case of all the ones I've talked to people about, and also at McPherson Fire Department, it goes to the dispatcher immediately. That dispatcher in that jurisdiction is already responsible for fire, ambulance, and police. And in many agencies, they're multi-jurisdictional dispatchers, so they would already be making provisions for the mutual aid or notification for standby.
So it really doesn't have to do with the bassinet at all. It just is who's notified through the system, wherever it's placed. The bassinet's placed. Right?
That is correct.
And then I have one more question, if I can. I didn't thank you, Madam Chair. But the other thing is, we had the gentleman talking to us about the tribal concerns, and is this a time to discuss that at all? You know, his concern about.
I think we'll stick to this amendment right now, and then we can bring that one up. Okay, thanks. Other questions on the amendment? Okay, Representative Johnson, you can close on your amendment.
Again, I would just reiterate that this is something that was spent quite a bit of time on in the Oversight Committee in the summer, recommendations that came out, some that this committee didn't get a chance to hear because it was done during the summer, but I would move my motion at this time.
We have a motion to amend. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it. Are there further amendments? Yes, Jesse.
Madam Chair Committee, with that, if you look at in subsection B, the definitions are now non-relinquishing, relinquishing newborn safety device, and they are not in alphabetical order. I would like to seek the committee's permission to put the definitions in subsection B in alphabetical order.
Okay, that's a technical thing that, do we need to vote on that? Okay, committee, is there any objection to putting that in alphabetical order? Okay, no objection. Well, you are thus allowed. She's got it. Representative Johnson, do you have further amendments?
Yes, I do. Just a moment. Additional amendments to House Bill number 2024 are recommended to us after hearing testimony from the Native American tribal groups. And so we have prepared, and I would submit And now, what you also have, I will point out, you do not have the amended sections that have already been approved here. But on line 3 after, it'd be child safety device, requiring inquiries and reporting of Indian child status. And then inserting also 38-2203, the word "and" there in the titling. And as we heard testimony from the tribal group, it might not be possible to get that information, but clearly it would be important in children of that descent to meet with the codes and requirements of tribal agreements in the state of Kansas. On page 11, page 1, line 11, at the end, this section shall not abridge the rights or obligations created by the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978, 25 U.S.C. and 1901. And again, this was to show that we were respecting our agreements with the tribal authorities. And the final change comes, my apologies, page 4. Did I miss one? Yeah, that is correct. On line 11 of page 2, or the information described in subsection K, and again that term on line 21, or such information is required pursuant to subsection K. Again, that allows it to deal with the tribal information. Page 3 would have no amendments. And finally, on page 4, just after between line 14 and line 15, there is a section K. An employee of a facility described in section C1A shall ask the person surrendering an infant whether such infant or other biological parent are a member or eligible for membership in a federally recognized Indian tribe in the identity of such tribe or tribes. Any facility maintaining an infant refuge bassinet shall provide the means for the person surrendering an infant to indicate whether such infant or either biological parent are a member of or eligible for membership in a federally recognized Indian tribe and the identity of any such tribe or tribes. An employee of a facility taking custody of an infant pursuant to subsection C1 shall provide to the Secretary all information received pursuant to this subsection. The Secretary shall provide such information to the court with jurisdiction over the infant. And then it indicates the section of the statute and insert KSA 38-2203 with amendment. Now, in discussion, and most of you would have heard that, this was dealing with information placed in the infant safety device so that a parent submitting it could, if it is not available, it is simply not available, which is no different than if a child was simply handed to a firefighter or a medical EMT at a scene if it wasn't provided. But it does allow for it to be ascertained if possible. So I would entertain questions on this amendment that came to us from the tribal group. And I would also make a motion that we make these amendments.
Okay, it's been moved by Representative Johnson to amend, second by Representative Ousley. Is there discussion? Representative Neighbor.
Within the new section on K, it talks about the infant refuge bassinet. Should that not be changed to the newborn safety device?
She is correct. Can I modify my motion at this point?
Well,
That is
Yeah, you can modify that to, as consistent with the previous amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Howerton. Okay. Is there further discussion? Representative Pickert.
Yes, my question is, so this is, the baby is to be placed anonymously unless the placing mother or whoever's putting the baby there wants to not be anonymous. Okay, so it says here, an employee of a facility described in section blah, 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 shall ask the parent surrendering an infant. I'm wondering, I mean, that to me means somebody is face-to-face asking the mother. Could there be a form available for the mother to fill out if she wants to?
Yes,
Does that
that's
indicate
exactly what
that?
the discussion was.
Okay.
So this is, the current law is about handing a baby over. And to make it, consistent with the newborn Infant Protection Act, that we wanted to go ahead and get the language in there about asking on the Native American descent. So we're adding that so that when the baby is handed over, if that's the route they choose, then those questions are asked. Then that question is asked.
The baby's not placed in the,
Not, right, if they just decide to bring it into a fire station and hand it to someone, then who they're handing it to would ask the question. If it would go in the bassinet, then we'd talked about having a form in there that they would.
it just wasn't clear to me.
I know, it's not, I don't feel like the form part is clear in here that,
That'd be really important.
I think maybe Jesse can respond to us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Pickert, the second sentence in the section states, any facility maintaining an infant refuge bassinet shall provide the means for the person surrendering infant to indicate whether such infant, and then continues the same qualifications. So the language doesn't say shall provide a form, it just says shall provide the means that satisfy that anonymous aspect of the surrender.
Thank you for bringing that up. Other questions? Representative Howell.
I have a question on the bill as a whole, just after all amendments, not necessarily this one, so I don't know when it's appropriate.
Okay, we'll get back to that then. Okay. Any other questions on the amendment? Okay, Representative Johnson, you may close.
I would move the amendment.
Okay, it's been moved to amend House Bill 2024. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it. Are there further amendments? Oh, Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did not.
You want permission to do something?
Yes. So when we amend a new section into a bill, the section that this amendment proposes to amend is 2203, and so numerically that would go in front of 382282, and so the amendment proposes that as the second section. Do I have permission to make that the first section to be compliant with the numbering system?
Does anyone have any objection to Jesse's important numbers? No one has objection, Jesse. Do what you need to do. Okay. Representative Johnson, do you have any further amendments?
I do not.
Bless you. Does anyone else have amendments? Where am I at? Yeah, we're back on the bill. But for, I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion to pass. We'll have the motion first. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we pass out favorably House Bill 2024 as amended.
It's been moved by Representative Neighbor to pass out as amended, or had a second by Representative Johnson. Is there discussion on the bill? Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Just for my own clarity, and this might be a question for Jesse, I'm not sure, but as we choose to pass this bill, I understand that the different locations or counties can choose whether or not to do this. My question is if they wanted to choose to have or continue to have it so that, let's say they could just come in and hand over a baby at the fire station, okay, relinquish the infant to the fire station. They can continue to do that. They don't have to make a change to doing it this other way. And if they do choose to continue the way they've already doing it or to do it in person only, is that leave them liable?
Jesse, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Howell, so a facility can follow the current law and accept an infant per a face-to-face surrender, as we've been calling it, and that person, as long as they meet all the qualifications of the child's less than 60 days old, it's not an abusive, or it's not a victim of abuse or neglect, then they would be immune from that civil or criminal liability. If the facility continues to only provide that face-to-face surrender, they're still subject to the amended section, subsection K, that would require that employee to ask about the Indian child welfare and the Native American descent of the child.
Thank you very much.
Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe a question for Jesse also. I know during discussion we had talked about the funding of this, that it would be, locally private raised money to install. Is the bill itself silent upon the cost for the installation?
Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ousley, the bill does not speak to the cost of these devices, nor does it do any sort of appropriation or transfer related to the devices.
So I'm trying to go down the road a little bit. We get a municipality that wants to install one of these. How are they guided to go about? I mean, what's the law say that they need to do to go ahead and install one of these?
Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ousley, the bill does not give them any direction in regards to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've got a lot of questions, and a lot of my questions have to do with current law, not necessarily the expanse of the law with the now newborn safety device. So I'll leave it to the wisdom of the committee on this one. Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Johnson.
Regarding cost and completing and facilitating these devices, there are packages available for donations. As Director of Public Safety, when the first 8 automated AEDs came out, we did not have any money in our budget for fire department or EMS to get those devices. We wanted them. We simply raised the money, and I believe it took us about 7 days to be able to equip all of our vehicles, police vehicles, and donate to the local school. And so we found it very easy to fund these when the time came. And I've already been told in Leavenworth County, they're just waiting to hear that we're ready to go on this, and fundraising will probably cover it within a very short time. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got 2 points of condition that I would like to speak to. Initially, it is the legal ramification that someone who submits a child that may have show signs of abuse, and the fact that we can then go and charge them. I think sometimes we sit in our respective places, and we don't think about the condition of someone that may be in a place where they want to relinquish their child. They more than likely they're probably not going to be in a favorable condition. I know from personal experience that there are many people that have a child and they want to relinquish that child only when they're under the influence of some sort of substance that they may be abusing, or when they're going through a particular situation with maybe someone else in their life. And at those times, they generally take that out on the child. So if you've got someone who is under the influence of something, and they have, in essence, abused their child, I'm here because I want to protect the child. That's the ultimate goal. And if I have to allow someone to not be admonished of some sort of punishment in order to protect the child, then that's what I'm willing to do. I don't think that it's a good idea that this committee move forward with this bill in its current state, simply because we're still going to punish that. We're going to punish that individual that may have abused that child, but during that time, they relinquish the child. In my opinion, I would certainly want them to relinquish the child, as opposed to recognizing that there may be some legal ramification if they relinquish the child, and then the child stay in that home or in that situation, and that individual is faced with those same circumstances 3 days later, 3 weeks later, 3 months later. To me, that's not protecting the child. If we are going to allow them to relinquish the child, then as difficult a decision as it is to make, I believe that we need to allow them to relinquish that child without any threat of criminal retribution at that point. That's point number one. Point number two, I think we need some clarification with respect to the piece where someone relinquishes the child, and then if it is deemed that they have relinquished the child, that they have no rights then back to that child. I know that this is supposed to be done under the cloak of anonymity. However, if we are being anonymous, I know those situations where you have two individuals that have that did not make a decision collectively to have a child. One of those individuals wants that child and the other doesn't. The way I see this, if that child is under the custodial care of one parent and the other parent then relinquishes that child, the parent that actually relinquished the child, if we don't know who that is, it would be very easy for a non-wanting father to take the child, put the child in one of these devices, and leave the child, and then the mother has no right then to come back to claim her child that she never wanted to relinquish. I just don't think that that's clear in this, because, and I don't remember the particular portion of it, but only, the way this reads, only the what would be the other parent or the non-custodial parent, that's the only one that has rights back to the child. And I understand that that opens the door for someone, if the child is relinquished anonymously, then that opens the door for someone to relinquish the child on Monday and then say they want it back on Tuesday. I just think that we need to look at that a little further, because again, those people that will be in a situation where they are willing to give up a child that they've had of their own, they're not going to be thinking quite as sanely as you and I. It's not going to be an easy handover. It's not something that they have done because life is so grand in in the place that they're living. They are in a situation where they're making a decision. It may be well thought out, but it's been my experience that these decisions aren't well thought out. They didn't, and I'm not saying that those situations don't exist, but most people in this situation didn't, sit around, and calculate their finances and determine, oh, well, I probably can't afford this child. Maybe I just better go on my way to work and drop this child off in one of these child safety devices.
Jesse, did you have any other clarifications on that that would respond to that? Okay. But you understand, this is current law. This is the law. This bill just allows for the anonymity of it.
Exactly, and that's my point. Current law says that you have to hand it over to someone. Mm-hmm. When you hand the child over to someone, and it's my belief or my understanding that the reason that we wanted this anonymity was so that we could get those individuals to relinquish those children and not have to be concerned with the ramifications. And I don't mean just social. We're talking criminal. Right? They don't want to, hand over a child, and then they become criminally responsible for the condition of the child, or financially responsible for. They want to be able to just be free of all of that. Okay, so again, I would submit that that we need to do some further amending on this bill so that we can address those issues that I propose. So at this time, I would not be willing to vote yes on this particular bill for those reasons.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, as I'm reading it, and I feel like the testimony was a little confusing. You asked a question, and I felt like it was kind of confusing back then when we had that testimony. It seems to me that it's pretty clear that the person relinquishing, they mean, especially with this addition, that it's supposed to be anonymous. And the person is not to be held criminally or civilly liable. In fact, it says that in here, I believe, Jesse, yes? Yes, it says that they're not going to be held, because I think there is an issue of, maybe one parent relinquishes because the other parent, they're not, things aren't going well, and even they're afraid of the other parent or something. And so they relinquish. So, but it does seem to me that there's adequate anonymity in here. But I don't feel like we got that question answered very well. So I can see why it would be confusing, or maybe you're super clear on what the bill says. But I feel like that there is safety for the person who is relinquishing and wanting anonymity from what I'm reading in the bill. And the ability to not be held criminally or civilly liable. But
Representative Carr.
And I would have to look to find it, but it said with the exception of abuse of the child. So that was clear. There was anonymity except when there was abuse of the child. So that would mean that that individual would then be subject to some criminal penalty with relationship to the abuse of the child. So from my perspective, that would mean that if someone was in the state of mind that they were willing to relinquish their child, and possibly they had already done some things to take out their anger on that child, they would then continue to keep that child in the home because they recognize the fact that they would then go to jail if they submit this child into one of these devices. That's where I have the issue.
Further discussion. Representative Wagner.
If we could direct this to the revisor. My understanding is that the anonymity or the ability to have immunity from prosecution that with this is identical to the current law if you would just hand it to the firemen or hand it to the, is that correct? I mean, that's my understanding.
Jesse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the same thing that happens under the law would just apply to a person who surrenders using the device.
Okay, okay. So there's been no change in the level of immunity from prosecution. It's just a different method.
Correct.
Further discussion? Let's see, where were we? Representative Neighbor, you made the motion. You can close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I close.
All right, we've had a good discussion on this. All in favor of passing out favorably as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it. And we will report the bill out favorably. Okay, committee, we ran long, but this was good discussion, and I appreciate you hanging with us. And we'll see you Wednesday. We're adjourned.